All right. Feels like I have to start with all right. I don't know why, but it just feels like I have to start with that.
This late in the season, is it a bigger challenge facing a team you have not seen yet before?
In some ways it is. You're starting. It's a normal week, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's a normal week of someone you haven't played, and then getting up to speed with who they are. In some ways, that's, that way. In another way, you're like, okay, we're not playing someone that really knows us. In some ways, they have the same issues we do. They haven't seen us before, other than maybe some crossover tape.
What impresses you most about the Chiefs' defense?
How they do it collectively. I mean, what a great job they've done collectively. Their coaches, and I know a number of those guys, and they're outstanding coaches. They got outstanding players. They're very disruptive. You have to have, I don't want to say this, whatever you're going to run, you better have the answers for what they're going to give you. So they're certainly, and it isn't, something that's a game or two. I mean, when you're fourth in the league in yards per play, and I don't know how many games they haven't given up 20 points, but you can see it on tape, how hard they play. They tackle well, they're well coached, and they're very disruptive.
We've heard Lamar's perspective on the adjustments you guys were able to make at halftime in the last game. John's perspective, but we haven't gotten to talk to you. What positive changes were you guys able to make at halftime?
Well, we called it better. We executed better. I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, it's always that in my mind. You look back at certain calls that you would have done differently possibly, but then also, there were things that everybody taking turns that doesn't allow you to stack plays. That's really it. Some of it was getting the ball out. Some of it was just execution. And sometimes it's just momentum. You get momentum on your side, which to me started off the second half. The kickoff return, get it out of our hands to Nelson, and then the big play by Zay that gets you fired up. It eliminates some of the anxiety, and then when we got down there, we scored touchdowns. That's the other big part of it is you're able to separate. I think about the Miami game when, it was there in the balance, and they kicked a couple of field goals, and we got a touchdown on a 75-yard play, got the ball back, and got that fourth down, and we scored touchdowns. And all of a sudden, you gain some separation there when you're able to score touchdowns and keep their offense off the field. That was big. Running the ball, getting the ball out of our hands, and controlling the game.
You use the word anxiety. As you put together your game plan, you think about your play calls, do you factor that into the fact that it's human nature? There's got to be a higher level of anxiety to start a championship game.
Oh, I don't. Pretty much every game we kind of think of it the same way. How we want to start the game, to try and start fast. We've been pretty good at that. I don't know where we rank, but we've been pretty good at starting. We've had some games not so much, but trying to get Lamar off to a fast start and us off to a fast start and get the lead. But I feel like that's maybe every game. You have a little bit of anxiety at the start of the game, and so try to get the guys, comfortable.
When you guys as a team are going up against a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, how does that impact you and your offensive game plan and how you may call the game at all?
Not really. I mean, as the game goes, it might, in terms of where you're at, but not initially. I mean, I get where you're going with it in terms of the anticipation of whatever, maybe that they're never out of a game or they're able to score. Sure, all those things are part of it, but until we get to that point, we're more concerned about each drive we have, what we have to do offensively.
I know you guys are hoping that Mark will be healthy enough for Sunday. Has Isaiah Likely's emergence since Mark's been out maybe kind of reconsider, made you rethink about how those two might fit together on the field? I know you guys haven't been with a lot of at least passing snaps.
Sure. I think all that figures in how well he's played, and then leading up to each, like last week or leading up to this week, how well Mark's practiced. That all leads into, okay, at every position really, at who's healthy, how do we anticipate that fitting into our game plan, and how can we incorporate them?
Todd, can you draw on the experience from the past 2 years of going to the national title game and just calling plays in high leverage, spots and situations?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, it's felt like every game we've had has been high leverage. I don't know. It's
Big time.
the NFL. I mean, I don't, I mean, we've had a lot of games this year that it feels like at some point in the game, very rarely is it not that way. Last week felt like that at halftime in the second drive. That's high leverage. I mean, when we got to the back end of the year and being on the road at San Francisco and Jacksonville and, playing at home against the Rams, I mean, you're going to have a number of those. And so I don't know if I can draw back from the last couple of years per se that would be any different than the games we played this year. But I understand, again, where you're going with that. But, again, it is what it is. I mean, a lot of big games. This just happens to be one of them.
Along those lines, I don't know if we've ever asked you, have you or did you and Mike ever talk about you guys meeting together in the college football playoff in 2021 and find yourselves back together?
Yeah, a little bit, just joking around a little bit once when I was interviewing, and it's kind of an awkward conversation, it's it'd be the other way too for me, I mean, it's and we had, they were really good, but we had a generational defense. I mean, all those guys were, there were a lot of first round picks on that, and we were just starting to get really good on offense, and the next year we were a lot better. So, it's just like I said, sometimes they did a great job. I mean, holy cow, I mean, because they got so much better on defense, and they did it coaching-wise is why they got to that point. But, we were pretty good as well. But, yeah, we don't really talk about it too much.
Todd, John was asked about the ongoing rotation with the tackles. Was that kind of something that you guys did by necessity that's turned out maybe even better than you could have imagined it would turn out? Or
I think somewhat, taking a little bit of the pressure off those guys. It was already happening in practice. Right. It was already happening where you're having a hard time getting through all the reps in practice, so those guys were already getting reps. So it just became more natural to allow that to occur in the games.
So did you have a tough time talking those linemen into doing that? Because linemen don't like to come out.
You'll have to ask those guys, I mean, to an extent. I mean, I don't mean that like from a negative standpoint. I think in critical situations, I think that would be true. I think that would be. I think in some scenarios, I think they enjoyed having a little bit of a break, with their body, because it was happening during the week anyways, to an extent. You'd have to ask those guys whether they were frustrated or not. I know last week in the second half, I mean, they went, and that was the anticipation. Try and get through the year. We thought there was, we needed to get them to the back half of the year. Is really what happened. Is we needed to get them to the back half of the year. Back end of the year, not half, back end of the year.
Coach, is it easier to make halftime adjustments versus in-game adjustments?
I don't even know what to say. I mean, when it works out like that, it's like, that was great halftime adjustments. I mean, I don't know. We just played better. We just executed better. We got a few plays that kind of got us going. Momentum's a powerful thing. When you're moving it, you're getting stops. You're making adjustments during the first half. Now, you are collectively as a staff talking through things, what you want to get to, what we haven't gotten to. That's a little easier to take a breath. But I don't know, it wasn't like even in the second half that we weren't talking. Does that make sense? So it's ongoing. Halftime's a part of it. What you do during the week's a big part of it. What you're doing during the game's a part of it. What you want to get to is a big part of it. Momentum's a big part of it. And like my wife says, I don't know why you just don't call the plays that work. Just seems that simple. I mean, just why would you call anything but the plays that work? I said, you're right, honey. As usual, you're right.